Harvey was born into the world upside down, back to front, and was christened Harvek Miloš Krumpetsky.
Of all the aspects of what I do, the part I love the most is the writing.
My cousin had cerebral palsy. When I went around to play, he'd be waiting there by the letterbox in one of his superhero outfits his mum had made.
Of course, I've won an Oscar for animation, but if you turn down the volume in all of my films, there's not much animation going on. There's a lot of blinking and waving.
He had an old shopping trolley we'd roll in down hills. And one time a gang of kids tried to get it from us. One of them called my cousin a spazzo and mimicked him. My cousin broke his finger, and he ran off screaming. My cousin thought it was funny.
The first day of film school, one of the lecturers said, put your hands up if you know what the 3 most important ingredients of a good film are. And everyone put up their hands and said directing and cinematography and editing, casting. And he said, no, you're all wrong. It's script, script, script. I learned quite quickly that I was never going to have the budgets for my films that I wanted. And so writing is the cheapest part of the process, but it's the most important.
But the thing he liked doing more than anything else was swimming. He liked to sink to the bottom, and everyone was unsure whether he was drowning. I think things are better down there.
My father was in the entertainment industry and my brother's an actor, and I sort of saw how hard it was for them, and I thought, well,
what do they do actually?
Well, my father's a retired acrobatic clown.
They were called the Flying Trapinos and toured the world until my uncle slipped on his own sweat and Dad became a paraplegic, then slowly an alcoholic.
By the time I was 25, I stumbled across the College of the Arts. I saw the animation school and I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a go. I applied. I didn't get in. They only accepted 8 students, but they had a waiting list, and luckily I was on the top of the waiting list. The film school rang to say, Adam, this is your lucky day. One of the 8 students has decided to drop out and you're at the top of the waiting list. We think you have potential. Do you still want to become an animator? And I said, wow, that's great, but look, I've just enrolled in this picture frame making course. I'm not sure if I'll get my deposit back, and they quickly twisted my arm, and so I did. I went to film school.
My uncle spent most of his retirement in his shed and backyard. He had a lemon tree he said was the best in the street because he'd wee on it every full moon. When it was grown, he put fairy lights in its branches.
The beauty about claymation over other forms of animation, over computer animation, is that when you see these characters and see the fingerprints on the plasticine, you know that they're real, they're tangible, they're tactile, and I think audiences appreciate that. And as you said, I make my films the same way they were made 80 years ago.
Life can only be understood backwards. But we have to live it forwards.
I get to play God with these characters. I don't have to work with real actors. Mine don't talk back to me. If they give a bad performance, I roll them up in the ball and throw them away.
Nah, seriously, is that really the
appeal? Well, look, I love to. I think if I was in front of a computer doing computer animation, I'd get very frustrated very quickly. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I'm not too good with digital technology. And there's something magical about model animation over computer animation, that it does have a link to the past, that everybody, and when they were kids, used to have miniature Star Wars figurines or Barbie dolls or whatever. So there's something about it as an art form which brings us all back to our childhoods.
Once when I visited, I found him talking to religious salesmen. He told me not to worry. He always invited them in because he enjoyed the friendly advice.
You can't help but bring yourself into your films, and I think that's part of the beauty of animation, is that you can get away with a lot and you can really push the boundaries, and that's why I think I can never move into live action, because I'd feel like I was restricted. You know, we can locate our characters anywhere we want. We can put them on the moon, you know, and they can perform. If they give a bad performance, it's our fault. We are the actors.
Seize the day, Harvey. Seize the day. Carpe diem.
Harvey is an archetype. He's an archetypal loser, and we've all had bad luck. And it's, you know, he's not a new character. I mean, you know, I see all sorts of other characters in Harvey. There's a bit of Homer Simpson in Harvey.
He stopped believing in fate and did exactly what the statue said.
My very first screening in Australia was the opening night of the Melbourne Film Festival in the concert hall, over 1,000 people, your family and friends, and the feeling of sitting in that audience watching your own film that you've spent 4 years in a storage unit in Moorabbin making 3 seconds a day, and to know that you're not just making the audience laugh, but you're actually moving them and nourishing them, and so then, you know, and they're giving up 23 minutes of their life to watch something that you've indulged in for 4 years. So, you know, that feeling of satisfaction and fulfilment, you know, is great.
Harvey didn't just seize the day, he was strangling it.
If you actually didn't do the animation, what do you think you'd be doing now? Picture frame? Seriously?
Oh, look, before I even went to film school, I sold T-shirts just across the road at the St Kilda Esplanade Craft Market, and I was there for 5 years. I hand-painted 5,000 T-shirts, and you know, my dad was very encouraging and thought that possibly I'd become a T-shirt mogul, entrepreneur, and but I just felt that I had another calling.
When they found Harvey the next morning in the corridor.
You've also done some pretty risky things. I mean, firstly, even just for the sake of humour, the testicle thing, the thalidomide baby with no arms. Yeah. I mean, that's poking fun at sort of people with stereotypes which have got problems as it is.
As a filmmaker, it's my duty to push the boundaries, and it's my duty to be original and move animation into an area where it hasn't gone necessarily before. And when I write about characters who are, you know, marginalised or seen as disabled or afflicted or flawed or whatever you want to call it, and I don't try and use those terms, you know, at the end of the day, you just got to go with your instincts. And when I was writing about Harvey losing his testicle, you know, I used to think, you know, is this becoming contrived? Is this affected? Is this, you know? But then you think, no, this sort of feels right, you know. And the fact that Harvey and his wife Val adopt a little thalidomide girl, again, you know, my producer, when she read that, went, oh my God. And I said, no, I think this rings true, and you've got to go with your instincts. And so far, so good. I haven't offended anybody, really.
One of his testicles developed cancer and had to be removed. But this was when he met nurse Valerie Burstall.
I start with the detail and work backwards. So I think of all the ingredients I want in my film. So for Harvey example, I wanted a character who gets struck by lightning. I wanted him to fall in love with a nurse in a hospital. I mean, you know, I put in all sorts. I put in a lot of smells in my films. You know, that I put in. You know, I love stringing words together that start with the same letter. So I play with all the elements and really polish the script.
This is where he got struck by lightning.
It is extremely difficult at times to animate even the simplest things like running water or an expression on the face that is a very subtle micro expression.
Yeah, how do you do that? I mean, I also noticed in the eyes, I gather you take away the balls and replace them with a slot or something?
Yeah, you replace my eyeballs with blinks. I mean, even a blink can be very difficult. You can have a slow blink, a drunken blink, an alcoholic blink. So, you know, and look, it's just rehearsing. Well, everything we do is very prescribed, very rehearsed. And again, we are the actors, so we have to bring these inanimate objects to life. So a lot of Harvey's idiosyncrasies are actually mine. Harvey's gestures are very similar to mine because I was the one who animated him. And again, you say Nick Park looks like his characters. Well, that's because...
Talks like him too.
Yeah, and he's got a whole way of speaking, and my characters do a different way of speaking. So, and I think that's what also, creates a style as well.
But he didn't always laugh. He'd often get angry, frustrated and violent, screaming and flinging himself about. Once I watched him punch a hole in the wall, but my auntie knew what to do. She'd grab him, look him in the eyes and say, "Bake a cake." He'd calm right down and begin to measure, pour and mix, waiting for the best bit at the end, when he could decorate however he liked.
Sometimes there's too many things you can do to a character, and I think this is a problem that a lot of animators do, is that they want to animate everything on the character, the hair moving, the eyes moving, and there's too much for the audience to absorb, so you just peel it away and think, well, what is at the essence? What am I trying to say with this movement? Especially in a poignant scene, sometimes just a blink gets the message across.
Yeah, but how do you know that?
Well, you don't until it's up on the big screen, and sometimes you're completely wrong. You think that was just, there's parts of Harvey which I've got wrong. I just think, why did I choose to do it that way? I should have done it that way. But again, you just got to trust your instincts. You bounce ideas off the other people in the studios. You rehearse.
I worry about you and other animators. I honestly, have you started this yet?
Oh no, we're a long way off starting, but
I reckon you're in for a rude awakening.
It's like a sculptor trying to teach another sculptor to sculpt in their style, and that is a hard thing. And for Nick Park, it was a hard thing, but he's now got the right people, the people who just are on his wavelength.
A boy in the grade above me said that I had nits too, and that I'd got them off my stinking drunk dad. He squashed his bubble gum into my hair and pushed me into the girls' toilets. When my brother found out, he punched him in the eye and was suspended for a week.
In the past, I was a cinematographer and the lighting guy, and I've always had an editor, which is great, a great editor, Bill Murphy. But on the next film, I have to designate jobs. I have to, and that's the risk. And there's no way I could make the feature film by myself, or did it take 30 years? So the reality is, I have to, I have to choose people who I think I can trust and who can do the job. And luckily, we'll have a lot of people to choose from.
Often I'd go and visit Mr. Stewart next door. He had macrocephaly, which made his head really big. We'd sit for hours talking. I asked him if my brother would go to hell. Only prostitutes and accountants went to hell, he said.
Has success fucked you a little bit? As an artistic sense?
Well, I think not in an artistic sense. It is a very odd thing, and it does take a while to get used to the, walking down to the milk bar and a complete stranger coming up wanting to know what the Vanity Fair party at the Oscars was like. And
are you joking?
Yeah, they're the things you get. But look, the fame thing, the great thing about it for me is that I don't need it necessarily. You look at all these celebrities who are on Big Brother and those Australian Idols, and they cling to the fame thing for as long as possible.
Because they've got nothing else.
They don't, but I'm a storyteller, and if the fame thing ended tomorrow, it's fine, because I'll just go back into the studio and make films.
At school, Ruby excelled. She went into university and came out a lawyer. Then moved to America and started her own practice, championing the rights of the disabled.
It sounds a bit of a cliche, but I don't make films to win awards, and I don't. I think had we aimed to make an Oscar, we wouldn't have won one. And the only thing that was certain at the end of the making of Harvey was that I was going to be unemployed. And that's pretty much has happened after all of my films. I've gone straight on the dole because...
Are you joking?
Well, I've had to. The budgets have run out, my wages run out, there's no new production to go on to. I have to quickly start writing, and of course, no one wants to pay to write.
You don't get royalties from Harvey and all this?
Oh, look, well, because all my films are funded by the taxpayer.
And grants.
Yeah, AFC, Film Victoria, SBS, and they're all government bodies. So if the film makes a profit, it goes to my producer and she disperses it to the investors. So Poor old Melly. I know, it's crazy.
So you really are harming profits.
I know, we often say that there's all this machinery above us and all these investors and companies, and we're the ones down the end, and there's a little pipe, and every now and then a little coin trickles out, and that's our royalty.
Serious?
You know, Harvey cost $400,000. Eventually, he probably will make his money back, but most short films never make their money back, let alone a profit. You know.
It must be interesting for you because I gather everyone sees you on television, they see you everywhere, they see the Oscar, they must think that you're driving a bloody Ferrari and all this sort of bullshit.
I, up until recently, drove a beat-up purple Volvo, and for the first couple of months after we got back from Hollywood, you know, I'd be at the traffic lights and you'd see people staring at you and think, and they're pointing saying, is that Adam Elliott crumpet person, and why is he driving a purple Volvo? So, you know, and that was the reality. We got back from the Oscars, and the Oscar doesn't come with a cheque.
God is better than football. God is better than beer. God is better than cricket, 'cause God's there all the year.
How would you describe yourself?
I describe myself as an artist, but I'm an artist that's interested in two things: experimenting and thinking about what the experimentation is about.
So is it a bit like a scientist as well?
It's a bit like a scientist, a bit like a philosopher. It's a combination of those three in a way.
I dream I'm in a strange house. You are leading the way. I can hear footsteps behind me. I turn around and realize that it is your footsteps following me.
When I've looked at the profiles of yourself, Jeff and Neil, you seem to be a little bit the dark horse of that sort of the three musketeers.
Right.
Jeff seems to be happily doing pillows and it's all that really happy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you know, walking on water and...
Oh, I see, yes.
Whereas you've got the dark sort of the... Is that intentional? I mean, do you have to bring light, darkness, and then maybe contemplation?
Oh, I think that's just where I come from and who I am.
Would you like a drink?
Thank you. I will have a scotch and ice.
My experiences are a family that were refugees from fascist Italy, then war-torn Italy, and a lot of traumas in the family. So in a way, my personal life has been about tracking and coming to grips with those traumas and making sense of them.
You lie there like a small, terrified animal. You'll be crying. I stand there motionless, angry.
I think what defines me, but also defines the contemporary world, is dislocation, if you like, or people being dispossessed, being in exile, being traumatised by that. So I think certainly the 20th century you can define as the century of exile and the diaspora, and it's a very key feature of that century. I'm not sure about this century. There are other things now beginning to define it, but they're very similar. They're about dislocation, being in a world that's unimaginable and unbelievable in a way that's very disorientating. Because of my personal history and because I'm interested in trying to come to grips with certain things that occurred in my family, I'm particularly focused on finding ways to engage with those sorts of experiences that to me are really defining experiences in the world today. So rather than running away from them, I'd like to try to grapple with them in a way that means that we don't repeat them.
Dear Angela, I wish I could say I was not a proud man, but I am. All men are proud.
What part of what you're doing is art, and what part is it almost journalism?
In a way it's a bit of both, because the way I see art is, for me, art's about where you live, what time you live in. So what time you live in is what a journalist is concerned with, coming to grips with what are the forces we don't see, what are the forces we do see that are driving the agenda. So to come to grips with a trauma, for instance, or with darkness, you don't run away from it because it will just continue following you. So the only way to stop the ghosts, if you like, is to stand up to them and say, okay, what do you want to say? Let them say it and then see what the audience thinks about it, and then that helps the darkness to evaporate. My personal experience is that if you don't face up to the darkness just gets worse, it gets darker, if you like.
We have become death, the light of the world.
I don't know where I end and he begins.
I explode into them. My mouth
I grew up with the dark shadow of the Cold War, if you like, of nuclear destruction. And that was like, okay, it's all going to be over in an instant. Now we're facing up to a scenario where it's not going to be all over in an instant. It's going to be death in piecemeal, or the loss of a close one, you know, at random. So it's not about this plan that's about to unfold, but it's about these really random events that, in a way, are nonsense. They don't really make sense. So it's a whole different scenario, if you like, human scenario that we have to come to terms with. And artists are very good at dealing with unimaginable scenarios because their strength is their imagination, their ability to think what was unthinkable before. So as an artist, I'm particularly interested in thinking of particularly dark, unthinkable scenarios, but not for the sake of it, but to actually give us an opportunity to come to grips with it. But my unthinkable scenarios are always based on fact. They're always drawn from things that have actually occurred.
All to nothing.
A separate development, police are seeking a researcher who is known to be living with Dr. Siller to help them with their investigations. It is not known whether she survived the blast.
Is art supposed to have a statement, or is it supposed to be ambiguous enough that you can find in it what you're looking for?
My answer to this is to go back to the early Greek philosophers, people like Aristotle, and their approach to art, to politics, to life was, how might one live? So for art, to me, art is a way of trying to look at possibilities for living, possibilities that are maybe dark, but in other ways are very realistic in a sense, provide a basis from which we can think through and experience other scenarios. My interest in autonomy in a virtual environment, for instance, I'm particularly interested in developing virtual characters or machine agents that can think for themselves, rather than virtual characters that do what we want them to do or think the way we want them to think, to let them have their own autonomy so that we interact with them as if they were another human being, with the added benefit that they think unlike a human being. So they give us a bit of an edge in our experience, in our interaction.
Welcome to your room. You know this is your room because you've chosen to enter. Do not be afraid of your room, because it is you. Welcome.
There's no one here. What's happened to you? Did he do this?
Interactivity to me can also be about providing a scenario where it isn't just the artist or the human agenda that's put on play, but rather an interaction between the human and its creation, the machines, if you like, the virtual characters,
so
who can come to life, who can interact with us, who can help us come to grips with what's happening. So it's a whole different paradigm, if you like, or framework of approaching interactivity.
So unlike your normal dark side, you don't think the machines are going to try and obliterate us?
Well, that's part of the mythology or the trauma of the machine, I think. And that trauma really is a mythology that has to come to grips with. I know the common idea of the machine with intelligence is of the evil machine, and that begins with a misinterpretation of Frankenstein. I mean, Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein not as an evil machine, but that's been a gloss that's put on it. She saw the machine as a victim of human desire, if you like, of human evil. And I'm more interested in her scenario of the machine as someone who can actually partner with us, dialogue with us. It's just unfortunate that humans have been traumatised by this idea that they're not God, that they're the only intelligent being, that anything else that has intelligence must be evil.
Body? What body? Where's your sister? What have you done?
It's like drowning. Slowly. Everything going dark, spinning away in blackness.
I always wanted to be an artist.
Yeah, but why?
Why? Okay. But yeah, okay. Because art is an opportunity for us to animate things that we find difficult to resolve. There is the magic in unblocking and animating and bringing these characters that are demons in some senses of the words, or are dark forces, or are inexplicable forces.
Sure.
You bring them to life, you start a discussion with them, a dialogue with them, and the whole thing resolves itself through the discussion. To me, art plays a very critical role in helping us come to terms with ourselves, but also our world. Your inner world and your outer world are really just one world, and what you do to resolve your inner world also helps to resolve the outer world.
No one must ever know. You run your mind over it again and again, lovingly, with care. You know everything that happened, because it's happening still.
The human imaginative process is undergoing constant evolution, constant change. Our personal and our social imagination is probably more excited today, more stimulated today than ever. The unfortunate thing is that we're using formulas to address the problems. We're using cliches to address the imagination, if you like.
Right.
So when it comes to terrorism, we respond to the notion of terrorism with a cliche. Oh, it's this. When in fact it's a lot more complex. Or global warming is this, but it's not, it's more complex.
So we're trying to make it easy to understand.
We're trying to make it easy to understand in a way, but we're also not wanting to understand it.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Don't hurt me.
I think you should tell people you're going away.
Why?
Because they've started to ask questions.
I've got nowhere to go.
I think you should go away.
Why video?
Well, video is interesting because it's the lingua franca of communication across the globe. So it's the way people primarily see themselves, but also see others. So in a way, I like to work with the language other people interact with.
Right.
So it's like the baseline of human interaction, and it allows you to move from one scene to another rapidly without thinking about it.
Why not just make movies?
The major difference, I think, is the level of intensity. With a movie, you're dealing with a layer of and a whole portfolio of intensities, of intense moments, intense episodes, very intense characters. Whereas with video art, you're able to just concentrate on one thing and meditate on it and expand on it and allow your viewer to immerse themselves in that one moment.
Went to work as a psychologist in Baltimore. And that stage doctoration I wrote in this country. It was in 1950.
Some of your other works have been almost taking the human form and making it ugly, whereas a lot of art is actually the opposite. A lot of art is looking at the beauty in the human form. Where does that come from, and why do you need to do that?
Well, where that comes from is this interest I've got in the way the human form is changing. It's always been changing, but at the moment, in our point in time in history, the human form is changing dramatically and very, very fast. It's gone from a type of human form, the beginning of the 20th century, to a type of human form that now is tied up with engineering, with science.
In terms of all this plastic surgery?
Plastic surgery, but also new concepts of engineering of the body that you do through your own, say, aerobics, etc. So you actually, everyone's shaping their bodies now. At the beginning of the 20th century, shaping was an unconscious thing. Now we're shaping our bodies in a very conscious way. So my interest in the shapes of the human body is just to explore the possibilities, what the human body is capable of, what it's capable of looking like. And my, if you like, the other work, the other work that's about dark scenarios is looking at what we're capable of facing up to.
They raped me. They stood around and they watched and they raped me, and no one lifted a finger. No one. They were my friends and they raped me.
normally the stimulus is something I read or something I see on the news. So it always is based in journalism, if you like. It's always based in fact, in social history. So something happens and then I remember something similar happened to a friend of mine or a member of the family. So the two things work together, my own personal history but also the social history of my culture.
What's it like working with these crazy guys here at Cinema?
Always unpredictable and always leads to pretty extraordinary results.
And the other thing is, why do you always have to throw in the naked ladies into your videos? Is that the Italian in you that needs to
Oh, there are naked men as well.
Oh, okay.
You just don't see them, that's all.
He helped people
Help them what?
cope with life.
I don't position myself anywhere. I don't try to emulate anybody. I don't follow the brands. I don't see what's in fashion. So from the very beginning, as with my first watch, the Foundation watch,
is that it?
which is this piece. I had an average education. I didn't accept I was good at woodwork, good at metalwork, okay, these kind of things. But I never really perceived myself as being somebody that was creative. And I found through a very kindly careers teacher a subject called horology. The lead lecturer was a guy called Mr. Beanie. I instantly had a rapport with the guy and I fell in love with him. And why? You have the mixture of art, of history and mechanics. This is in Hackney Technical College, London. I was good at it. I came one of the top people in my class. I loved it and it fitted. It just fitted. I spent 2 years there and it was a mixture of everything from turret clocks to quartz watches. I was given the option to go to a school called Wilde in Neuchâtel. That was incredible. I learned in 4 months probably what I would have learned outside in the sort of the real world in probably 4 years. It was more focused in the direction of watchmaking. And it was repetition, starting on basic repairs and building and stuff from pocket watches all the way down to ladies' watches. And each time you would do, I forget now, 7 or 8 watches of the same caliber, parrot fashion, each time doing the same thing, going smaller and smaller and smaller. And there were almost points where I felt my ability pop, and suddenly you go onto another level. And then you go further, pop, go onto another level.
So it's almost like karate or something.
Yeah, I became, I don't know if I wasn't a black belt by the time I got to the end, but it was a hell of a good start. My first job was in commercial watchmaking in Oxford for a company called Watches of Switzerland. And I worked there for 6 months. And that was everything from Tissot to Rolex. And I did everything and got very bored after 6 months. So I then packed it in and they offered me a job in London. And I was the Piaget watchmaker. And I did that for 6 months, learned everything, got bored of that. I did a short stint with Omega and I was about to go to America. I got drunk the weekend that I was meant to go, but I ran into an antique dealer called George Sommer, who had an antique shop in Piccadilly Arcade. He offered me more money than I'd ever earned at that stage, and he said, I want you to develop your own workshop and do after-sales service for me, as well as restoration of all my watches. I was then with him for 7 years, and I touched everything. And if I liked what I did before, I fell in love with it. I worked with early English manufacturers like Frodsham and Dent, quite often people I've never heard of, and Smith, original Patek, original Cartier, before it became the big empires that they are today. I saw things which were really beautifully made, but badly designed, and what happens over 50 or 100 years.
Yeah.
And I saw other things which were really pretty crummy quality, but they've been really well designed, and they were still going. And all of those things I learned from working on like 200 years of watchmaking.
Yes.
And then it was one of the things that frustrated me in modern watchmaking, was that they hadn't learned, because nobody had actually seen it, and often they were making the same mistakes again. Some of the best watches, wristwatches, in my opinion, were either made prior to the 1900s or in about the 1940s.
Right.
And they actually achieved a certain level of theory and precision which made for things which will just last forever. Prior to the 1940s, they almost became too fine. Beautiful watches made by companies like Cartier. Their technical guy was Lecoute, and the company brand movement was European Watch and Clog. Exquisitely made. Nothing could reach them. But after 50 years, they wear out, and you have to start restoring them. All of these things together, they kind of directed me to what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. The hardest thing in restoration is not repairing actually what the wear in watches, but is the repairs made to the wear in watches because they didn't survive the first time. And to try to be sympathetic to the original style,
yes.
Sometimes when things have been glued or soldered back together and you've got to get rid of it all and you've got to redesign it. And that was probably the first time I ever did design. To design something which is functional,
yes.
which works, but also is identifiable as the correct component for that piece. So when it's finished, you don't see that it's actually been replaced.
Historically, English watchmaking really was at one stage quite strong.
It was the best. But the English refused to change. And when you work on these watches, you kind of understand it, because you wouldn't want it to change because it was so amazing. But then the Swiss came along and were able to produce high quality, but in production.
Rolex originally an English brand?
Yeah. Wilsdorf and Davis were the two guys. I think Davis was English and Wilsdorf was Austrian. One was a bracelet manufacturer, one was a case manufacturer. And early Rolex, they're still marked W&D inside. Movements were made by a company called Rehberg. And if you follow Rehberg, the same movement Rehberg, which was made like in 1920 or 30 or whatever, you can see an evolution as a restorer, how that grew literally over the next 50 years. And that's one of the things I loved about it, because you could follow history. I'm not safe. I didn't approach my business from the point of view of what will sell. I did it initially, and I started the whole thing off. I worked as an independent for other companies, but I designed my watches the way I wanted to make them, with my own philosophy, my own approach.
Yes.
And I was fortunate that people liked it. So I kind of landed very well.
But I mean, I gather you're saying there were some tough times.
I would never do it again. I had potential orders, and the prices were high because it's handmade watches.
Yeah.
No bank in Switzerland was prepared to cut me any slack.
You're serious?
So I then had to work for about 3 years developing the foundation of the Piccadilly watches. By basically funding myself through working on complications for other companies. For anybody who becomes independent, you sacrifice probably the first 3-4 years of your life. Weekends, holidays, and as a watchmaker, it's very insular. And after a while, you go a little bit gaga. I was saved by the advent of the birth of my boy. And then he kind of showed me what was really important and balanced out my life. And my wife also kind of kept me on the tracks. I made everything, my own cases, my own dials, all the modifications to my own movements, own bridges, own rotors. The watch developed over about 2 years. The basic pointing, meaning the basic axe positions was fixed from the original design, but after that the final aesthetic I was never really sure about. All of this, the finishing, the assembly, I used some components from some very early pocket watches, but nothing was standard. Everything had to be modified. All the pinion sizes, pivots, profiles were changed. In fact, a lot of it I thought I was saving myself time, but had I made it all from scratch, I would have probably made it quicker than the system that I actually took. But I'd already spent years in restoration, but this was another education on top. We get approached by people from everywhere, retailers and distributors from all over. We're tiny, we make a couple of hundred watches a year. I think they come to us because it's real. Watchmaking crosses over from something which is human, art, something which is physical, mechanical, which works. And when you work with these kind of pieces, there's a certain affinity. And I felt that. And I spent 7 years doing it, and in antique stuff. And everything that I think I loved from that kind of diffused into me and then came out in that foundation piece. And when I look at it now, I can see, because it just evolved. I didn't know at the beginning what it was going to look like aesthetically. But now I look at it and I know where everything comes from. It wasn't meant to be taking components, but it formed a DNA which now creates my style. Harry Winston, the concept came from the ex-managing director, a guy called Maximilian Bousset. What I made for them, instead of a 1-year limited edition opus, I designed 2 watches for them, or 2 movements for them, which they used over 2 years.
Right.
The first was a manual movement, which was actually this is my 2nd generation of, but it was basically this watch. Straightforward minute tourbillon on this side.
Yep.
This version has an enamel dial. Between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, the little black hole is a window.
Right.
And when you get to the last 24 hours, it changes color from black to red. So you have a visual warning. On the back, you have a double retrograde, which is for the power reserve. So here, 0 to 55, and then from 55 to 110 hours.
Right.
And then all the bridges are hand engraved. If you look at the shape of the wings here, you have it in the tourbillon bridge, the sweeping lines. It's all the same character as this piece. I mean, you have the same DNA running through. I had a phone call from California. This was when I was working in restoration. It was from a representative of a woman who was the daughter of one of the original JP Morgan directors. What had happened was she owned a watch which was made for her father, given by JP Morgan to each of his directors during the recession, or after the recession in 30s. I'm not sure when the date was.
1929.
They had actually sought out somebody to restore it in California, couldn't find. I went to, I think, Sotheby's or Christie's in New York, and they forwarded on the name of our company, the company I worked for, which I had constructed in restoration. And one day, and I never really thought about it, I didn't know, they just got gold pocket watch, slightly rusty because of flood, kept in the safe, damaged, can't be repaired in America. When I received this watch, it was a solid gold Frodsham watch which filled the whole of my hand. It was a multi-complication with minute repeater, tourbillon, and split-second chronograph. Today worth, I don't know, $1 million, I have no idea. At the time it was like several hundred thousand, I think. It was just mind-blowing. And just before it arrived, I had some people come to visit me who were part of the family or part of the employed, just to check me out. And I didn't know what this was about until this watch finally arrived. And it was part of history.
It's my very pleasant task, through a celebration of the life and career of one of the world's great filmmakers, Stanley Kubrick. When you go downstairs, you'll realise how incredible his career was. And here's a man who redefined the genre many times over. It gives me huge pleasure to welcome our very special guests here tonight, particularly to Christiana Kubrick, Stanley's wife and partner, and Christiana's brother, Jan Harlan, and who was a producer and co-worker with Stanley for many, many years. And I'd also like to welcome Malcolm McDonald, who many of you will remember.
McDowell.
McDowell.
I thought you were talking about the singing.
And so I've made my mistake now. But Malcolm, and who I want to welcome personally and thank, because Beethoven has never been the same for me ever since that film. Now, it is my very pleasant task to now introduce one of our special guests, Christiana, the wife and widow of Stanley Kubrick, because I can think of no better person to take us behind the title of this exhibition, Inside the Mind of a Visionary Filmmaker.
I can't believe I'm here. I'm trying to imagine him here now and what he would think of all this. One of the things he would say is tell them that we once nearly came to Australia for good. This was during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
A great film is one person's work. The collaboration is only there in the sense that the others have to support the script and the director. And this guy walks into the room, it's like turning the lights on. And this is inspiring. He's intelligent, he's quiet, he never raises his voice, he knows what he wants in the end. He doesn't necessarily know exactly how to get there. And great painters have again and again wiped their stuff off the canvas and struggled with it. So the struggle is not a problem. It's the end result. The end result has to survive time. And I think that is the sign of great work of art. A great work of art changes the situation. That's why I like the image of the track, where the railway goes in a slightly different direction once you pull the switch. No longer there, it goes there. This is true for Picasso and for Shostakovich and for Stanley Kubrick. And these are reference points for the particular art form.
What were you doing before you met Stanley?
Oh, I worked in New York and in Zurich and in Vienna and in Frankfurt.
But as in the film business?
No, not at all. In the business planning and organization. And I met Stanley, of course. I had known him all along. We played table tennis together and played with the children and all that. But when he then decided to go to Romania with this film Napoleon, a great project, and he had prepared it extremely well and written the script and all this. He asked me whether I wanted to join him, maybe for a year or so. And because I speak German and a bit of French, and that was at that time also suitable in Romania, and my job would have been liaison with the military authorities. You know, I have very little to do with the film industry, but it has to do with organizing.
Yes.
Yeah, because
administration.
Yeah, absolutely, and you need in a big film you need many guys like that to organize. The director can't do that. Because he's my brother-in-law, I got to know him on a personal level. But what bound us much more is working together. And my first sort of little bit of contribution, if you want to say that, was a fluke, and that had to do with music.
Yes.
Yeah. So I, for example, I brought him stacks of LPs because he called me up and said, oh, well, he was editing 2001, and it was finished. I had nothing to do with this film. I visited the set a few times, that's all.
Yes.
I was working in Zurich, and he said, I'm looking for a piece of music that's really, majestic and short. It comes to an end. Everything I have, it sort of goes on forever. And can't use it. I don't want to fade out, Beethoven. It's ridiculous. Or Wagner, or Bruckner, or Holst, or whatever it is. And he had a score written for him, which was okay.
Right.
But okay wasn't the same as fabulous.
Yes.
Well, and so I was lucky, or he was lucky, that one of the choices I had in my stack was this Strauss, Zarathustra. The English film industry basically is a service industry to Hollywood. I mean, most films
These
made
days,
there.
yeah.
Oh, for a long time. I mean, the British film industry in itself, we're talking about 40 years ago, that's a different story. It doesn't exist. You have studios, you have terrific people, you have excellent people. MGM had their own studio in Bournemouth in England, and it was financially better for him to do this in London. And he liked England. He likes the climate very much. He doesn't like very hot and very cold. It was not a major kind of life-changing decision. We now stay in the UK. No, he liked the house, he liked to work, and after 2001 he simply didn't return. He also hated flying. In fact, he stopped. He didn't do it anymore after. So between, he went always back and forth with the Queen Mary or with the QA1 or 2 or whatever it was.
What did he do on the bloody ship?
He edited.
You serious?
Yeah, absolutely.
He edited. He had actually.
He had. Well, at that time you edited with film, and Ray Lovejoy, who was his editor then, he told me very much how they edited on the ship. I did not have anything to do with what is artistic, other than thinking with him, reading it, being interested, but that's different. The only area I would be sort of active on an artistic level is making music suggestions, but certainly not selection. I was involved in matters that had to do with get this, make a deal here, what is available, that's what I did. The loveliest deal I ever made, which was very satisfying, was the deal for the 3 tanks in Full Metal Jacket. They were American tanks, which we needed for the Vietnam War, obviously, but we couldn't get it from the Americans because they didn't like the script, because you need the script approval before they cooperate, and they certainly didn't like it at all. Now, we had to find them somewhere else, and we were lucky to find 3 of those old things in Antwerp, with the Belgian army. So I somehow talked myself to the right office and met this officer, and yes, there they were, these 3 things. For me, one tank, it looks like the other, But, okay, they were obviously the right model, and I said, well, could I hire them for 6 months and take them to England, to East London, and this gasworks where we shot the film. And he said, well, look, he was very sweet and very nice man. He said, the Belgian army is very flexible, but hiring tanks is not in our books. We don't do that. We don't hire tanks out. And so I said, well, what are we going to do? And he said, look, just bring them back. What you cannot fake is the weight of the tank.
Yes.
When you see this thing moving, and going into the ground.
Yes.
Oh no, that you cannot fake. You can, but it doesn't look good.
Yes.
Whenever you see in a war movie a cardboard tank, it's a cardboard tank.
Yes.
No, our tanks look good. Now, the way when you fire the gun, obviously we couldn't do that. You have to fake that, and special effects people have to put an explosive charge at the sort of the chest of the tank. It's really a piece of a telephone post which goes into an iron tube with a charge, and it is synchronized with a phony little puff. But then the key thing is that the tank does this. That you cannot fake. That, I mean, you certainly, maybe you can today. I'm not a special effects guy, but at that time that was the only way to do it, so that it looks good. The older he was more interested in the substance of the dialogue. Ice White Shot, that was an aim for him.
Was it simply the chemistry that existed already between those two?
Not a bit. He was very interested in Tom Cruise. He was at first not interested in Nicole at all.
Oh, really?
Not a bit. But then when he saw Nicole much later doing the film To Die For, he realized what a fantastic actress she was, holding a close-up, at a long period and really being very expressive. He then spoke to Tom, asked him whether he minded his wife and all this, and he said, no, it's good, we love to work together. And then only came Nicole on, and he was delighted with both of them. He thought they were both absolutely fabulous and just what he wanted. There was never an alternative even considered for Tom. When I say this, 20 years earlier, because he bought the rights to the book already in 1971. Right. At one point he considered Woody Allen to play the role as a straight, not as a comedian obviously, but as a straight Jewish New York doctor. And
isn't that a contrast?
Oh, it would have been a different film then. Sure. But at one point he wanted to make a black and white art house movie, very cheap, doing it in Dublin or in London, probably in Dublin. Yes. And he was for a week walking on clouds with that idea, and he said, I'm going to do that. And apparently he never spoke to Woody Allen. When I asked Woody Allen, he said, he never talked to me about it. But, anyway, before it came to it, Stanley dropped again the whole idea because he simply wasn't ready. He wasn't happy with the ending, and he considered this the most difficult film in his life.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
Because it is a subject matter where everybody in the audience is an expert. The subject matter is jealousy. Sexual fantasy also, but jealousy. There are no lay people. Everybody knows what we are talking about. The thought in AI, and Steven Spielberg very, very beautifully executed this and was very faithful to Stanley's idea and script, is that we have disappeared. We're gone. The film doesn't say why we have gone. It doesn't matter why. We'll go. There's no one way or the other. We'll disappear. We'll disappear. And the thought is that we then are, what's left of us are machines that we have developed to such an extent that they can sustain themselves. And now these are very benign and super intelligent machines that are in fact are able to be excited, namely to be excited of finding little David in the ice. It's a great thought. I mean, but it's a fairy tale, it's a fantasy, and then at the end, and that's not fantasy and fairy tale, or maybe particularly, you could say, you see these machines, how they work together. They touch each other on the shoulder, and everybody is downloaded with all information.
The Stanley Kubrick machine is no longer in operation. Yes. What does a number 2 do afterwards?
After Stanley's death, first of all, we had to finish Ice White Shot. Then came the documentary I made on Stanley Kubrick. Then I worked the pre-production on AI with Steven Spielberg. Then the exhibition was launched. Books, the big Taschen book. We had to do that to get the rights, and because all the first half of the book are frames from his film. We are doing the next book now, again with the same editor, Alison Castle, on Napoleon, on this project. I have 13,000 images, pre-photography on this, so that we use this. He was a great sports and particularly tennis freak, right?
Really?
So, oh yes, he loved tennis. And during the second week, Wimbledon, our office was very quiet in the afternoon. Anyway, so we watched together a match between John McEnroe and Boris Becker. A long time ago now, but and we were riveted, and you know, it's fantastic on television. And then afterwards he said, "Oh, gee, I mean, goodness me, I mean, you know, no film can ever reach that level of excitement." Right now, and that's why I had the other camera here. I'm preparing a film on the life and career of Malcolm McDowell, which will be added with the next edition of Clockwork Orange as a second DVD. I do this for Warner Home Video.
Worked in the library. You know, we shot that whole scene in Aylesbury. Oh. And I'd ripping up these priceless books.
I remember the days where we'd take all day to do a master. So Stanley would scurry home, get the stuff back, the rushes back in the morning, see how it looked, and then if he didn't like it, he'd recast.
Of course. Exactly.
Oh yeah. Wonderful. Can I ask
you are following me around.
Oh, I have to. Just one question.
Everybody is a big fan and he just wanted to say hello.
Hello, how are you?
He doesn't even want an autograph. He just
Nice
wants
to
to
see you.
say hello.
How sweet. Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. You're not going to ask me the same boring question. What is art? I haven't got a fucking clue, okay?
Really?
Excuse my French. No, I don't know. It's what is art?
Yeah, but tell me something. When you were watching yourself on screen sometimes, did you actually see yourself go into that other place?
No, I'm acutely embarrassed, and I always go, my God, why did I make that choice? I hate watching myself on screen. Yeah. In fact, there's probably 50% of the movies I've made I've never seen.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm serious.
What is actually your absolute favourite film that you've ever made? Seriously.
It's the next one.
The next one. Always the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, I'd stop.
Hello, and welcome to Teach Yourself Atomic Physics. Now you may be asking yourself, why do I need to learn about atomic physics? Well, the answer is simply this. Because atoms are everywhere. I suppose I see myself as a writer, mainly. I mean, I write, and then I enjoy mixing it with other media to bring it alive. The only way to make sure that one doesn't fly off and disappear into nothing is to anchor oneself. Chaining oneself to a massive boulder is, of course, the method of choice, but impractical for many due to the geological shortcomings of the local vicinity and the absence of good old solid chains, the sort used to chain Samson to the temple pillars. This is one of the dilemmas of modern day life. Not enough boulders, not enough chains. I wrote poems sort of for myself for a long time, and then I was in Chicago when the poetry slams were beginning.
What years were we talking
That was 1986, and at the Green Mill, and now it's become this...
But what is a poetry slam?
The poets compete head to head. There are 3 judges who put up scorecards for the poems that they read.
Really?
And say, yep, they said that was a 10, that was a 6.5. If you piss somebody off, they might say that was a negative 29.
Right.
I once got a negative million.
Really?
But yes.
So poetry is a sport too these days?
It is a sport, and so it started off, literally one guy starting it off in Chicago, Mark Smith, and it's an international phenomenon. You can travel anywhere in the world and find poetry slams. There was an old lady who swallowed a bomb. She swallowed the bomb to kill the country.
Is that also influenced from the rapping? Is that?
It is, yeah, certainly. Like the whole live poetry, spoken word, rap, hip hop have all, I think, cross-fertilized and helped each other. Some of the top poets when the poetry slams sort of reached their peak, they're still incredibly popular, but they kind of had a boom.
Yes.
And MTV had an MTV Poet. There were some hip-hop artists, DJ Renegade and people like that who, you know, you'd say they were taking their rap and their hip-hop, doing it just without the music behind them, and quite impressive performances. Turn on the light and kiss her. Turn off the light and kiss her. Turn on the light and watch her in the mirror. Turn off the light and watch her in the mirror. Turn on the light and think of her sweetly. I started off in engineering, and then had some bad experiences with professors and decided to change, and I didn't want to lose my science credits.
Yes.
So I thought, oh well, I'll go to psychology, because I could do that and it wasn't a real science. And then I ended up getting a double major in English, so I actually have a Bachelor of Science in English, which I think is kind of funny. And then I went on to do, and that was at Dayton in Ohio, and then I did my master's in literature at DePaul in Chicago. Turn on the light and need her. Turn off the light and need her. Turn on the light and pull her to you. I've really been in the city, you know, I was very urban, you know, the suburbs and the city, but it was all very kind of gritty. And then I was in Japan, and I was in Kyoto, which is this glorious, the old capital, and I just couldn't write. I wrote things like, you know, the mountainous mountain, how mountainy and green. It was just didn't work. Lesson 17, the speed of light. You do not need to be near him. He could be in the kitchen and you in the bedroom. He could be late at his office and you coming home from yours.
That if a writer gets it right, the mind then does all the work and puts you in another place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas a piece of art, they're trying so hard to create the atmosphere around you.
I think it's because it involves language, and language is just so incredibly powerful. It's really the way we communicate in our everyday life, you know. When people are in love, you can give somebody some roses, you can watch a nice movie together, you can have a favorite song, but they still want to say, you know, it's always, you say those 3 words. You know, I want to hear you say the words.
What, please sign the prenup?
Exactly. I get half.
Yes, exactly, I get half.
Lesson 61, I think, relativity. Wait for somebody you care about to leave you. It's best if they choose to leave by train and intend to leave you forever. Go with them to the train station. You may wish to carry their bags for them. This is not necessary, but adds to the sense of futility. Assist them with boarding the train. Plead with them one last time not to depart. You may wish to fold your hands as if in prayer, or press a note to the window that reads, "Stay." The more you plead, the greater the eventual effect. I meet a lot of young writers who think that everything they write is great, and so I mean and I was in that stage as well, and I think it was actually when I started to realize, no, it's not all good, you know, and started to take it seriously. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but it was literally, as a defining moment, I think, was when, you know, my wife and I were talking about it. She said, you need to take your work seriously. A couple committed suicide by supergluing their nostrils shut, spreading superglue on their lips, and embracing in a kiss.
What is it supposed to do to make you feel that, and it's gone from the realm of narrative into the realm of art?
It has to have an investment from the writer in the work. Good art and writing, it has that investment, and that's what's in there.
What do you mean by that?
It's why a Rothko painting is so powerful. It's all of the things that he was bringing to that work of art, and I believe that the artist invests that into the work, and that it's still there, and that's why when I need inspiration, I read good writing, or I listen to what I consider good music, or go and look at art, because that investment from the other artists is just sitting in there, humming. For the purpose of illustration, let us imagine that the nucleus of an atom is a person's head. We can think of the neutrons that bombard the atom as bullets being fired in a constant stream. Eventually, the head, like the nucleus, is split in two. I had an idea to do something different, which was a project called Limited Edition, where I got a bunch of secondhand frames that just, all of the frames were different. And the idea was that I was going to write one poem to fit into each frame and display them as a book. So it was a book, and if you wanted to read the book, there was only one copy, and that was it. And you had to come to where it was being exhibited, and you had to read the book. And then at the end, I sold off the individual pages.
Oh, okay.
And that worked really well. But there, once again, it was like, once I had that concept, I'm going to write poems for the frames, I wrote for, the next few months. Same with atomic physics. I kind of said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the poems about physics, and then that is what triggers me and gets me going. And then I just, look through textbooks to get ideas for topics and go with it. You save them every day. You call and ask after the children. You tell them he didn't mean it. You remind them of coming birthdays. You always bring the cake. You listen until your ears are numb. You lend them whatever they need. If you didn't, who would? It is up to you. In order to get people into the poetry and make it accessible for them, I find that adding music to it, or in this case, having the visuals behind it as well, it adds another dimension to it and is able to slide in places that it might not have gone before. Sit still in your favorite chair. Now ask yourself, why is it your favorite chair? Is it because you sailed around the world single-handedly while sitting in that chair? Is it because you made wild, passionate love on a moonlit beach in the Maldives while sitting in that chair? In some ways, as I said, I kind of get pigeonholed as somebody who performs the poems and does embellish it a bit with the music, but I don't mind that necessarily.
When did that happen too? Because to be an artist to write a poem is hard enough, but to put a hat on and tap dance on a stage.
It started literally about 5 years ago, and we did it as a live project. Emil was doing live video mixing with videotapes, popping them into the different video machines, mixing them with a little mixer. Literally now, he's become obsolete. He's been superseded by technology.
Sure.
I wanted to have something that would be portable, that would be, easy to bring to any venue, and put it in there, to museums or schools or galleries. Is it because you saved them? You saved them all while sitting in that chair.
What's your favorite verse?
This is from a piece called They're Killing Dogs Tonight. All the boys on Pardon Street are whispering in their jeans to the girls in pink proposals nicked from adolescent dreams. And the lampposts are getting scarcer, and the words are growing thin as they float among temporary eyes, the color of cardinal sins. So see if your God's on duty, and whistle with all your might, 'cause someone left the back gate open, and they're killing dogs tonight. Empty the contents of your life onto a table. Then, try and put them back again. Hard to make them fit? Well, hard to make them fit? Cut off your communication with the outside world forever. Do you still have a special drawer for spoons? Do you? Now, scream at the sky when you are angry. Now, try to recall that anger. Where has it gone? Well, where has it gone? Take a long journey to an undiscovered place, carry no map and ask no one for directions. Do you get there? Well, do you get there? One of the funniest things I've had happen fairly recently with the atomic physics is I was doing it for a small group of science communicators, and I kind of met up with this science fascist who just said that what you're doing is just not on because it's not real science. And I made the mistake of saying, well, no, I think, science, it's not about being right. And it was just the worst thing I could have said. He said, no, science is all about being right. Then my response was, well, scientists have always thought that they had it right. We thought we knew what gravity was back when Newton was there, and then now we've changed our ideas, and then Einstein had it right, and then now it's string theory has it right, and every new idea is supposed to be the end, but it's not. We just keep finding out that we haven't quite got it, and it's the same with art. You just have to keep putting it out there, and it's not about being right.
To me, art is very much the materialization of the mood and feelings and dreams of the culture. From decade to decade to decade, it changes. And so it has a very intellectual foundation. If you look at the art of the late 1800s, it was very romantic. It was very much a part the pre-Raphaelite movement was like in a dream state, and it was reflecting the European love of ancient days and ancient times before the industrialization hit. William Morris and all of his cronies got together and created this arts and crafts movement. The philosophies that they had were that in order for man to live in a true state of bliss and beauty, they needed to be surrounded by things that were handmade. Because in the making of things by hand, a spirit is imbued into that object.
Art is an expression of the mood, of a sentiment. The way that you conduct yourself, the way that your attitude in front of the others, this is art too. I mean, and then you can sell art. You always sell art. In the sense that when you do something, you try to sell it to the others. When you do a picture, you try to sell it to the others. But also when you do communication, when you work with the other, when you are with the dinner, when you're friends, this is also art. The way that you express yourself. Commercial actions is just translation of something that you had, that you're projecting to the others, and then you project it. You can put it on the other's hand in different ways. You can put it in their hands by money, which means that you are transporting what you are thinking to somebody else and then they give you money, but also by recognizance, which means that when you are doing something and the others appreciate that, maybe there's no money involved, but there is love among each other. So then sometimes you sell art with love, sometimes you sell art with a sense that what you're giving to somebody else, you want that the other ends give you feedback whether they like it or not. And sometimes there is money which is involved, sometimes there is friendship, sometimes there is...
So you're saying there's an intellectual transaction?
Always.
It's not just a commercial... So
Always.
you're saying commercial transaction is a part of a transaction, so it doesn't matter how the transaction happens.
Exactly.